October Council has just finished, and I'm here with Maurie Mulheron, New South Wales Teachers Federation President, for a wrap about the decisions and discussions that took place at Council. Maurie, let's start talking about salaries, which was a major issue. Last week, the department provided their award offer for school teachers. Can you outline for us, first up, what amounts are on offer and for what duration?
Sure. Yes, we did receive a salary offer that we were expecting. The quantum is 2.27 from the beginning of next year, 2% from the following year, the 1st of January 2015, and 2.15% from the following January, the 1st of January 2016. And clearly we had an expectation that at the very least we would get the 2.5% public sector wages policy that was on offer. But what we received, of course, was similar to what Tafe teachers received, which is a discounted
so this is discounted for the superannuation guarantee levy increases, is that right?
Absolutely, and people have been following this in the media will know that the state government has been trying to attempt to discount their 2.5% public sector wages policy with the superannuation guarantee levy that the federal government enacted some time ago. And despite having a full bench of the Commission say, no, that's not fair, and despite having the upper house of the New South Wales Parliament saying, no, that's not right, the government seems to be determined to try and push it through. But we're confident that it won't be accepted, even though there will be a hearing in mid-November where an economic argument will be put to Justice Boland. We believe that it will fail any test, and we have an expectation that it will revert to the 2.5. But of course, we don't know that yet until we actually see what happens in that IRC hearing in a few weeks' time.
Right. And in their offer, we understand that they made some other proposals for what they're calling additional reforms, which fit together with other policy announcements like the RAM resource allocation model that was announced last week, their Great Teaching Inspired Learning, their local schools, local decisions policies. Let's talk about each and what Council thinks about the offer overall.
Sure.
So if we talk first about the proposed proposal for a standards-based remuneration structure for classroom teachers, what's that about?
Well, look, I'll preface it by saying that we also need to understand that the conditions in the award have been largely preserved. So
right.
There is no change to conditions. So we're looking at additional matters that we have known, well, since the announcement of local schools, local decisions last year, were going to be put to the union. And you're right to talk about what they call the standards-based remuneration structure for classroom teachers. This was a position that they put out in that document last year, local schools, local decisions, and it was to say that instead of there being pay based on experience, that they would pay teachers according to the standards, effectively the institute standards. We have spent some time over the last 12 months or more putting back to the government that you need to be paying teachers according to experience, steps, increments, whatever you want to call them, but there should not be hard barriers, that we should be encouraging teachers to young people to come into teaching and then attempting to retain them by having them progress through a salary structure that rewards them for remaining in the service. So that is where that sits. So it's a standards-based according to the Institute. We know now in the offer, and the offer is in a very early embryonic stage. We've got very little real detail, and we've got quite a number of scheduled meetings before us where we'll be really starting to discuss this. We know that there will be, fortunately, steps that will be automatic. That will be, of course, rewarding for people to remain in the pay scheme, but and the real hard barrier only exists above the top of the scale, where they've got this new position called that'll be according to the higher accomplished teacher accreditation process. So that'll be a new, if you like, classification that sits above the top of the scale. The detail we'll be providing the detail to members once we get it and we enter into the negotiation. So that's what the standard-based remuneration structure would look like.
Right, okay. And if we take a moment to remind people that the Minister announced this week their new resource allocation model, that's also coming into the salaries in the area of principal classifications, I understand, or the proposal is that it come in. The Federation made a statement about RAM last week. Can you just remind us what Federation had to say about the Minister's announcement?
Sure. You're right, Sally, to link it to the principal classification. The RAM model, the resource allocation model, is what Treasury's been after for a long time as a new way of putting school funding into schools' budgets. And we've always opposed that concept because it's a model that is a mechanism that is quite where you take the certainty of funding based on enrolments and other programs to one where Treasury determines ultimately what's going to be provided in your school budget, and you put the responsibility on the principal therefore to have to manage that. Now that's all very well if you've got increased funding, which we will be getting under Gonski, but what happens, as we have seen in other states, where the tap gets turned off, gets turned the other way. It's a mechanism that cuts both ways, and we've seen situations where they've brought in the notion of an absolute local budget, where it's being used by Treasury to actually reduce funding to school. So we're opposed to the structure and the concept. Where it fits into the salaries, of course, is it's going to be used as a measure of school complexity. That is, when they change the principal classification system, at the moment we've got primary classification and high school classification. They're intending to have one set of classification, and then rather than have that on school size or school enrolment, they would have it on school complexity, which they can only measure really by the size of this resource allocation model,
so
this
that
RAM.
would take into account not only the number of students in the school, but the demographics of the school and indices around poverty and
the complexity of the programs that the school might be running, because there could be a whole lot of loadings to do with Indigenous students, NESB, students with disability, that would require much more additional and complex workload that a principal would have to manage. And so we have some sympathy for the notion that school complexity and principal's classification might be one that you could determine that. But at the moment we do have some problems with what they've put before us.
So it sounds like there's quite a bit of discussion to pass between the parties before there's anything resolved about that.
And I think at this stage the membership need to understand that we haven't really even started formal negotiations other than have two fairly brief meetings where the documentation was provided to us over the last few days, and just a very quick explanation of what they meant by the documentation. We now, of course, have got a number of scheduled meetings where we will actually then need to tease out exactly what they mean, and of course therefore to put a counter proposal where we have some very serious concerns, what we would be putting back to them. But we'll be spending the first meetings, of course, seeking much more additional information around the costings. There's a whole lot of areas that where they're silent on a whole lot of issues to do with casual teachers and temporary teachers and other pay scales. There's a lot of information we still have before we can even begin to start to see what our response is going to be.
Okay. And finally, the proposal for a revised performance and teacher improvement scheme has appeared in the offer as well, and I suppose that's another one where much more detail is needed.
Sure, and this is an area that is always a sensitive area because we're going to teacher efficiency, and but we do have a position that there's been a whole lot of, over the years, there's been a whole lot of issues of concern that's been raised about the current model. It's worked well in some places, but in other areas there's been a whole lot of concern. So we hope to negotiate a revised teacher efficiency program or process that can be measured in terms of being fair and transparent, and rigorous.
Right.
We're not about defending people just for the sake of being defending people. We do believe in high standards, and we do believe in processes that does address efficiency and performance issues. So we would want a system that does that. But we will certainly be negotiating that with the department, and we'll be doing that in good faith. Hopefully, we'll come up with a system that will be a great improvement on what we've got to date.
Okay, great. Turning to Tafe.
Yes.
Obviously, the Tafe salaries were settled with the AEU New South Wales branch when the members voted to accept the enterprise agreement. I noticed at council a lot of people looking very resplendent in their new Stop Tafe Cuts T-shirts.
Yes.
So obviously there's a Tafe campaign afoot. Can you just update us about what's happening with that?
Yes. As you know, with Tafe, there's been a whole lot of concerns. We've now settled the enterprise bargain agreement, the EBA. The salary increase has now become a settled matter. There's going to be a lot of work we can do with Tafe around that. We're now part of a joint management committee that's going to oversee that and watch this space on that issue. The other issue, of course, is the direct cuts that has happened through budget cuts, the labour expense cap. That's a real concern where we literally have members, teachers being made redundant. And that's clearly a very difficult situation that will lead to a lessening of what Tafe provides the community. But the third area, of course, of concern is around a policy called Smart and Skilled, which is due to come in July next year, July 2014. Yep. That is essentially where Tafe will be effectively privatised, or vet education will be privatised, because what will happen is that Tafe will be just regarded as one other provider in a market. And so,
we've seen that in other states already, haven't
absolutely. We've seen other states. We've seen it in the Adult Migrant English Service. We've seen it in preschools where these for-profit providers come in. They get public funds, taxpayers' money. They even get access at times to the TAFE, public TAFE colleges to run a for-profit business where TAFE was doing that, and where they can actually then grow. And we've seen the proliferation. There are somewhere over 5,000 private providers now, and we believe that will mushroom after Smart and Skilled. And the other thing that of concern with Smart and Skilled, of course, is that it puts the onus on the individual student to start meeting the costs. So it shifts the cost burden from a government obligation to provide a well-funded vet service or vet training opportunities to one where the individual student and or their parent now have to pay for that skills and that qualification. And that will lock a lot of young people at a time of very high youth unemployment. To be going that way, to put some barriers in place for young people to gain access to TAFE is a concern. So the TAFE teachers are not taking this lying down, and the T-shirts you referred to are part of the Stop TAFE Cuts campaign. There is a Stop TAFE Cuts website, which we urge people to sign up for, where they can keep abreast of the campaign.
So just Google Stop TAFE Cuts, or one word?
Absolutely, and they can get access. They can fire off emails to politicians, and they can keep on top of the campaign.
I understand they were quite a presence in the Miranda, the recent state by-election in Miranda, where there was a huge swing against the government. Oh,
absolutely, and in fact the successful candidate Barry Collier in the wash-up of that election mentioned the fire brigade because of the loss of services in the area fire stations, but he also quite clearly said, and we also believe that the cuts to TAFE have had a big impact in this community, and the community are very aware of it and are very angry about it. So we're going to try and appeal to the state government to review where they're going with TAFE. Once you lose TAFE as an institution, there's essentially no rebuilding it. Once it's lost to for-profit providers and there's a massive profit motive, then the capacity for governments to reclaim that area is really gone.
Yeah.
So this is very radical, extreme policy that we believe will have a permanent and historical detrimental effect on provision of public education.
Well, radical and historical policy, I suppose, neatly brings us to probably our final point for discussion. It was the first council since the election of the Abbott government, and both Abbott and Education Minister Christopher Pyne have refused to guarantee the full 6 years of Gonski funding. Obviously, this campaign, as you reported to Council and Council are overwhelmingly in agreement with, cannot stop. What's the next milestone or milestones in that campaign? What are we heading towards next?
Well, look, as you know, and as you said, there's a 6-year agreement. That is that the states that signed up for a 6-year agreement, a transition agreement. That will take 6 years to get close to the school resource standard line. And so all the funding has been predicated on bringing schools up to a standard over a 6-year period. And the way the funding is structured is that really the real money, the big money, is in years 5 and 6. And so just, for instance, in New South Wales, by way of example, in public schools next year, it's about an additional $115 million. In year 5,
that's additional to current funding.
Yes, that's what we call additionality or additional Gonski funding over and above. But by year 5, that $115 million will have grown. I think it's about $1.1 billion. You know?
Additional funding.
And then about $1.3 billion the 6th year, the following year. You see about
and then the tap doesn't turn off.
That's
continues.
Right. And so that's 70% of the money is in years 5 and 6. So the promise years, first 4 years, is really shortchanging us considerably. And so the first real milestone, to go to your question, is next May, where the federal budget will be brought down, and it is in that budget that the next 4 years will have to be budgeted for, and by that stage the 5th year will be in that 4 year. Right. So we will know in May next year whether this government is fair dinkum in terms of saying they support the Gonski model.
Right.
Because if they don't fund the 5th year in next May, then we know that they're turning their backs on it.
Right.
And so what we have to do, we've got over 100,000 people have signed up for the I Give a Gonski website, and we're taking more names every day.
That's nationally?
Nationally, and the I Give a Gonski website, if they Google I Give a Gonski, it'll go straight to that homepage, and that's a way they can keep abreast of that campaign. But of that 100,000, I'm led to believe that the majority of those people are actually not members of the teachers' unions. And it's actually citizens, members of the community. So I think there is now, for the first time, a substantial social movement around schools funding that probably not going to go away in the foreseeable future. It's unfinished business in terms of Gonski. So what we'll be doing this term will be working to develop a new strategy in the build-up to the May budget next year.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a wrap for Council. That was a pretty full agenda.
It was a big day.
Okay. Thanks,
Sally.
Maurie.
Thanks, Sally.